Good morning, everyone. It's truly a pleasure and an honor to have the state's senior United States Senator here with us today. Edward M. Kennedy has been serving our Commonwealth and our nation for more than 4 decades, and in the process creating a record of legislative achievement, accomplishment virtually unmatched in our nation's history. From health care to guaranteeing equal rights for all Americans, to labor issues and on so many other fronts, Edward Moore Kennedy's contributions loom large. On a personal note, I could tell you that I spent a time in Washington running a scientific society, and when support for science education fell to zero within the National Science Foundation back in the 80s, he was the lion who helped put that back again for us, and I've appreciated that. I've always appreciated your support for higher education, especially public higher education, a demonstrated record of accomplishment. On behalf of our 5 campuses, 58,000 students of the University of Massachusetts system, I'm pleased to welcome you here today. I'm now going to introduce Chancellor Motley for the formal introduction. Chancellor Keith Motley, the Chancellor of the University of Massachusetts at Boston.
Thank you, President Wilson, and thank you all for that standing ovation when I came in the room earlier. Welcome again. We're so glad to see everyone here this morning, and we're so excited to be able to be a part of this wonderful event. On behalf of the University of Massachusetts, Boston, and all of our community, I'd like to welcome all of our guests today, particularly Senator Kennedy, who is here to discuss the war in Iraq. And so we're so glad to have you here. It's a topic of concern for all of us. It's certainly a concern for us here at UMass Boston. As most of you know, we're not a typical university, nor do we want to be a typical university. We offer the academic opportunities that are offered by an excellent university, but we also offer a special urban mission. We are known for our diversity. We are proud of our diversity, and part of that diversity is seen in our involvement in veteran affairs. Since its inception, UMass Boston has been a place that honors and supports those men and women who serve in the United States Armed Services. We are proud of our Joyner Center for the study of war and social consequences. We're proud of our McCormick Graduate School of Policy Studies and their special issues, volumes, War on War, Volume 1 and 2. We are proud of our Office of Veteran Affairs, directed so ably by Gus St. Silva. That office currently provides direct assistance to approximately 650 veteran students and nearly 100 reservists, and so we're so proud of that. In December, right in this very room, we raised money through our holiday celebration in order to send tokens of appreciation to those from this community that are serving overseas. Had a wonderful response from that and received back many notes, and we're so proud, and we hope that these people will be able to return back to this community and back to the normal life. Today, we also will talk about sacrifice. One of ours, U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer and 1983 UMass Boston graduate, Kyron Kennedy, did not return to a normal life, but instead died in Iraq in the line of duty in 2003. It was with great sadness that we dedicated a memorial bench in this past November in his memory on one of the cold and windy days, but beautiful days here at this university. One way that we recall the sacrifice is continue the discussion on war, and so we're so glad that Senator Kennedy is here today. He's been a long friend of our university, supportive of our urban mission, particularly to our commitment to affordable, accessible public higher education. He was instrumental in securing the $12.5 million that we received from the National Science Foundation. A 5-year, give him a round of applause. I have to give him a round of applause because he's also instrumental in my children gaining a new level of respect for me. As I've told you on many occasions, your chancellor until you go home to 22 Palisades Circle. I told them that Senator Kennedy was going to call me this weekend to tell me about something he was going to share with the university. They told me that I was fabricating the truth, but they told me another word for that. I was so glad I wasn't home to receive that call, because on my voicemail was, Keith, that distinguishable, wonderful voice. I've kept it. And every time they remind me, I let them know, listen, I know Senator Kennedy. So, Dad, you're the man. So, on behalf of our university community, on my behalf, it's my honor to introduce our U.S. Senator, Edward M. Kennedy. Let's give him a rousing round of applause.
Thanks very much. Thanks a lot. Good work. Good work. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. That Chancellor Motley is something else, isn't he? You get to see him every day, and he's like this. Thank you so much, Chancellor. President Wilson, we thank you so much as well. I'm extremely grateful to the Chancellor for his kind and generous introduction. And I am indeed honored to be here at UMass Boston. Many of the most talented people in our state have benefited from the outstanding opportunities you offer, and I commend you for your impressive leadership in higher education. I welcome the opportunity to meet with you on the issue of Iraq. 40 years ago, America was in another war in a distant land. In Vietnam in 1965, we had the same number of troops and the same number of casualties as in Iraq today. We thought in those early years we were winning that war. We thought the skill and courage of our troops were enough. We thought victory on the battlefield would lead to overall victory in the war and to peace and democracy for the people of Vietnam. We lost our national bearings in Vietnam. We ignored the truth. We failed our ideals. In the name of a misguided cause, we continued the war too long. We failed to comprehend the events around us. We did not understand that our very presence was creating more enemies and defeating the very goals we hoped to achieve. We cannot allow that history to repeat itself in Iraq. In his inaugural address and his State of the Union address, President Bush talked about the noble goals of spreading freedom and democracy and ending tyranny around the globe. There's no disagreement about these goals and the importance of these ideals. America has been a beacon of democracy and freedom and human rights for more than 2 centuries, and we cannot let the beacon dim. When America is at its best, our deeds match our words. But many of us feel we haven't done that in Iraq. We care about our country. Stephen Decatur famously said, "My country right or our country wrong." But others through the years have said it better. Our country, right or wrong, when right, to be kept right, when wrong, to be set right. We've paid a high price for the invasion of Iraq. Saddam is gone, but there were no weapons of mass destruction. The cakewalk the administration predicted became a quagmire instead. We recklessly shifted our focus away from the real threat to our national security, the threat from Osama bin Laden and the terrorists he was inspiring to attack America. In his State of the Union, President Bush talked about the war on terror. He spoke 27 times about terror, but he did not mention Osama bin Laden once. What world is he living in? He started a war we never should have fought. He stopped fighting a war we hadn't won, and left our greatest enemy in the world still at large, planning his next 9/11. We paid a high price in other ways for the war in Iraq. We insulted our allies, shattered our alliances, and lost worldwide support we had won after 9/11. More than 1,400 American soldiers have given their lives in Iraq. Our military is stretched to the breaking point, leaving us dangerously ill-prepared if other urgent needs arise. The families of our military and our Guard and reserves are suffering. We must learn from our mistakes. The insurgency is being fueled by the American occupation. We have reached the point where a prolonged American military presence in Iraq is no longer productive for either Iraq or the United States. The overwhelming and seemingly endless nature of the U.S. military presence has become part of the problem, not part of the solution. We were all moved by the bravery of the Iraqi people who voted in Sunday's election. And we honor the courageous men and women of our armed forces who continue to risk their lives for a better future for the Iraqi people. But we've been here before. As a headline in the New York Times in 1967 stated about election in Vietnam, U.S. encouraged by Vietnam vote. Officials cite 83% turnout despite Viet Cong terror. Let's not be lulled again. Let's use the elections in Iraq as an opportunity for a fresh and honest approach. Let's start by having an exit strategy. The election is a step forward, but it's not a mandate for the administration's current policies. It is not a cure for the violence and resentment caused by the perception of the American occupation. But the election does provide an opening, if we are wise enough to seize it, to demonstrate to the Iraqi people that we have no long-term designs on their country. President Bush shies away from such a strategy, but in fact, it's exactly what he called for in 1999. When he was governor of Texas and speaking about the war in Kosovo, he said, victory means exit strategy. And it's important for the president to explain to us what the exit strategy is. President Bush should follow his own advice. A coherent exit strategy is the best way to spread freedom in Iraq and lay the groundwork for the honorable homecoming of our forces. The first step is to confront and admit our own mistakes. Americans are rightly concerned about why our soldiers are there, when they will come home, and how our policy could have gone so wrong. No matter how many times the administration denies it, there is no question that they misled the nation and led us into a quagmire in Iraq. President Bush rushed to war on the basis of trumped-up intelligence and a reckless argument that Iraq was a critical arena in the war on terror, that somehow it was more important to start a war with Iraq than to finish the war in Afghanistan or the capture of Osama bin Laden, and that somehow the danger was so urgent that UN weapon inspectors could not be allowed to complete their search for the weapons of mass destruction. The weapons of mass destruction weren't there, but today, 150,000 Americans are. 32 Massachusetts soldiers have been killed in Iraq, and another 133 soldiers from Massachusetts have been wounded. One of the casualties was Chief Warrant Officer Kieran Kennedy, who was killed in Tikrit in November, was a graduate of this proud university in 1983. Another son of Massachusetts, John Hart, was killed in Iraq because his Humvee had insufficient armor. His parents, Brian and Alma, are here with us today. We honor their sacrifice. We honor their sacrifice, and we especially honor their dedication to speaking the truth to the Pentagon and insisting that better armor protection be available for all our troops. We're also joined by other families who have loved ones serving in Iraq. We honor their service, and we pledge to do our very best to support them. Sadly, despite the valor and dedication of our men and women in uniform, our nation's respect and credibility around the world have reached an all-time low because of Iraq. The convenient label of a coalition of the willing cannot conceal the fact that American soldiers make up 80% of the troops on the ground and have suffered more than 90% of the casualties. Ending the rule of Saddam Hussein was supposed to lessen violence and bring an irresistible wave of democracy to the Middle East. It hasn't. Saddam Hussein's capture was supposed to quell the violence. It didn't. The transfer of sovereignty was supposed to be the breakthrough. It wasn't. The military operation in Fallujah was supposed to break the back of the insurgency. It didn't. The number of Americans killed and wounded is the equivalent of a full division of the Army, and we only have 10 active divisions. We all hope for the best day after Sunday's elections, but Sunday's election is not a cure for the violence and instability. Unless the Sunni and all the other communities in Iraq believe they have a stake in the outcome and a genuine role in drafting the new constitution, the election could lead to greater alienation, greater escalation, and greater death for U.S. and for the Iraqis. The Central Intelligence Agency's top official in Baghdad warned recently that the security situation is deteriorating and is likely to worsen with escalating violence and greater sectarian clashes. The American people are concerned. They recognize that the war with Iraq has not been worth the cost in American lives, prestige, and credibility. They understand it has made America more hated in the world, created new breeding grounds and support for terrorists, made it harder to win the real war against terrorism, the war against al-Qaeda and the radical jihad terrorists. Conservative voices are alarmed as well. Paul Weyrich, the founder of the Heritage Foundation, said last November, "We are stuck in a guerrilla war with no end in sight." As former Coalition Provisional Authority advisor Larry Diamond recently said, there's a fine line between Churchillian resolve and self-defeating obstinacy. We must recognize that line and act on it. A new Iraq policy must begin with the acceptance of hard truths. Most of the violence in Iraq is not being perpetrated, as President Bush has claimed, by a handful of folks that fear freedom and people who want to try and impose their will on people, just like Osama bin Laden. The insurgency is largely homegrown. By our own government counts, its ranks are larger and growing larger. Its strength has quadrupled since the transfer of sovereignty 6 months ago, from 5,000 in mid-2004 to 16,000 last October to more than 20,000 now. The Iraqi intelligence service estimates the insurgency may have 30,000 fighters and up to 200,000 supporters. It is also becoming more intense and adaptable. The bombs are bigger and more powerful. The attacks have greater sophistication. An Army reservist wrote the stark truth. The guerrillas are filling their losses faster than we can create them. For every guerrilla we kill with a smart bomb, we kill many more innocent civilians and create a rage and anger in the Iraqi community. And this rage and anger translates into more recruits for the terrorists and less supports for us. Our troops understand that. The American people understand it. And it's time the administration understood it. Beyond the insurgency's fighters, it has active or tacit support from the ordinary Iraqis who aid and abet the attacks. It is fueled by the anger of even more Iraqis, not just Saddam loyalists, who can't believe that the United States is unable to provide security and other basic services, who therefore think we're unwilling to provide them. The International Crisis Group, a well-respected conflict prevention organization, recently reported these post-war failings gradually were perceived by many Iraqis as purposeful, designed to serve Washington's interests, to remain for a prolonged period in a debilitated Iraq. Too many Iraqi people do not believe that America intends no long-term military presence in their country. Our reluctance to make that clear has fueled suspicions among Iraqis that our motives are not pure, that we want their oil, and that we will never leave. As long as our presence seems ongoing, America's commitment to their democracy sounds unconvincing. Other indications of anti-American sentiment are clear. CDs with photographs of the insurgents are spread across the country. Songs glorifying combatants' poems written decades ago during the British occupation after World War I are popular again. We have the finest military in the world, but we can't defeat the insurgents militarily if we don't effectively address the political context in which the insurgency flourishes. Our military and the insurgents are fighting for the same thing, the hearts and minds of the people. And it is a battle that we are not winning. The goal of our military presence should be to allow the creation of a legitimate, functioning Iraqi government, not to dictate it, not to micromanage it. Creating a full-fledged democracy won't happen overnight. It may take years for the Iraqis to finish the job, but the process cannot begin in earnest until Iraqis have full ownership of the process. Our continued, overwhelming presence only delays it. If we want Iraq to develop a stable, democratic government, America must assist, not control, the newly established government. Unless Iraqis have a genuine sense that their leaders are not our puppets, the election cannot be the turning point the administration hopes. To enhance its legitimacy in the eyes of the Iraqi people, the new Iraqi government should begin to disengage politically from America and we from them. The reality is that the Bush administration has pulled the strings in Iraq, and the Iraqi people know it. We picked the date for the transfer of sovereignty. We supported former CIA operative Iyad Alawi to lead the interim government. We wrote the laws that now govern Iraq. It is time to recognize there is only one choice. America must give Iraq back to the Iraqi people. We need to let the Iraqi people make their own decisions, reach their own consensus, govern their own country. We need to rethink the pottery barn rule. America cannot forever be the potter that sculpts Iraq's future. President Bush broke Iraq, but if we want Iraq to be fixed, the Iraqis must feel that they, not we, own it. The Iraqi people are obviously facing historic issues in establishing a government, deciding the role of Islam, protecting minority rights. The entire international community has a clear interest in a strong, tolerant, and pluralistic Iraq, free from chaos and civil war. The United Nations, with our support, should take the lead in providing assistance and advice in establishing a system of government and the drafting of a constitution. For freedom and democracy to take root, the Iraqis need a clear signal that America has a genuine exit strategy. At least 12,000 American troops, and probably more, can and should leave at once to send a strong and immediate signal about our intentions and to ease the pervasive sense of occupation. Our military presence in Iraq has increased by 19,000 since November. The large majority of those troops were added to guarantee security for the election. There's no reason they should not come home as soon as possible. Even Secretary Wolfowitz the architect of the war, told the Armed Services Committee yesterday that our military presence can come down by about 15,000. Commanders have said they hope to withdraw about 15,000 troops sometime this spring or summer. For the longer term, President Bush should also announce his intention to negotiate with the new Iraqi government for a drawdown of American combat forces. As Major William Nash, who commanded the multinational force in Bosnia, said in November, a substantial reduction in our forces following the Iraqi elections would be a wise and judicious move to demonstrate that we are leaving, and the absence of targets will go a long way in decreasing the violence. America's goal, not a hard and fast timetable, but a realistic goal, should be to complete our military drawdown as early as possible in 2006. That goal is consistent with a timeline for the election of the permanent Iraqi government that will take place at the end of the year. It's also consistent with the view of the Iraq's interim interior minister, who recently said, "I think we will not need the multinational foreign forces in this country within 18 months. I think we will be able to depend on ourselves." President Bush cannot avoid this issue. The Security Council's resolution authorizing military presence in Iraq can be reviewed at any time at the request of the Iraqi government, and it calls for a review in June. The UN authorization for our military presence ends with the election of a permanent Iraqi government at the end of this year. The world will be our judge. Obviously, while American troops are drawing down, we must clearly be prepared to oppose any external intervention in Iraq or large-scale revenge killing of any group. We should begin now to conduct serious regional diplomacy with the Arab League and Iraq's neighbors to underscore this point. Clearly, we will need to maintain troops on bases outside Iraq, but in the region. We do need to train and equip an effective Iraqi security force. And we have a year to do so before the election of the permanent Iraqi government. We have the best military in the world. We won the first Gulf War, contained Saddam Hussein during the 90s, overthrew the Iraqi government in just 3 weeks. My wife's nephew from Shreveport, Louisiana, received 12 weeks of basic training at Fort Benning. He was supposed to receive additional training in Kuwait, but instead he was sent right to Mosul to serve as a gunner in a Stryker brigade. At 23, he's the oldest one. They call him Pops. He's home now, but he's ready to go back to Iraq. Our Army has great expertise in training programs. Every year, we send recruits through 21 weeks of training to become military police. Our enlisted infantry receive 13 weeks of training. If America can train the best military in the world in 13 weeks, why can't we train the Iraqis 8, 12, 15 months to fight and die for their own country? Secretary Rumsfeld has said about our departure from Iraq that it is a condition-based. It's based on when the Iraqi government and their security forces can develop the capability and the capacity to provide for the security of their people. Secretary Rumsfeld has mismanaged every other aspect of this war, and he must get this one right. With the international community's help, we can do even more and do it faster. The President will travel to Europe in a few weeks, and he should not come home empty-handed. The insurgents have been skilled at recruiting Iraqis to participate in suicide attacks. But too often, the trained Iraqi forces do not have a comparable commitment to the Iraqi government. The way to strengthen their allegiance is to give them a worthy cause to defend as soon as possible, a truly free, independent, and sovereign Iraq. President Bush has left us with few good choices. There are costs to staying and costs to leaving. There may well be violence as we disengage militarily from Iraq and as Iraq disengages politically from us. But there'll be much more serious violence if we are forced to go it alone. Setting a strategy for withdrawal may not guarantee success, but not doing so will almost certainly guarantee failure. It will not be easy to extricate ourselves from Iraq, but we must begin. Error is no excuse for its own perpetuation. Mindless determination doesn't make a better outcome likely. The book of Proverbs in the Bible teaches us that pride goes before destruction and a haughty spirit before a fall. It's time to improve our country's standing in Iraq and in the eyes of the world. And the election has given us an extraordinary opportunity to do it. The danger is very real that if we do not, our leadership in the world will be permanently lost. We cannot let that happen. There is a wiser course that we can take in keeping with the best in our heritage and history. a course that will help America at long last to regain our rightful place of respect in the world and bring our troops home with honor. Let's take that course and take it now. Thank you very much. Good. Thank you. Good. That's that plug I gave you.
Thank you. The senator just said you guys didn't have to do that for me again, you know. We have some questions that we've taken from the audience, and what I want to do is start with one from a student. And it says, Senator Kennedy, what is your opinion on the training of the Iraqi troops? We want you to expand on that a little more. And is it taking too long? And if so, how do you propose we speed up the process?
The best estimate now that we have the Armed Services Committee yesterday, which I'm a member, is there are 132,000 Iraqis who have some kind of training, that includes border guards, police, security guards. And of that 132,000, the military, Abizaid, the general, would say that 30,000 of them are trained sufficiently to take over military operations. I think the definition of taking over military operations should be, can they do a job that an American serviceman does? It's a big, ambitious goal, but that should be the criteria. General Abizaid believes that they have 30,000 at the present time. Since the election, there are 2,500 that are volunteering a day to join the military. And this is the basic point that I mentioned in my talk, and that is, if they are getting those kinds of recruits, and they're getting those kinds of recruits now, why can't we expect that they're going to be able to develop the training kinds of programs over there that are so important for them to train troops, and then secondly, to ensure that these troops have something worthy to fight for and to die for? That is not evident now. That's been part of the whole morale situation in any kind of interviews with the troops. They don't know whether they're part of this puppet regime or whether they're really fighting for their own country. I think that's enormously important. Our American servicemen all know what they are fighting for. But the troops to date have not known that. And I think now that we have the steps that have been taken in terms of political independence, which all of us admire and should support, we should take advantage of the development of the cadre of military personnel. Finally, other countries have offered to provide skill training to this. The European NATO countries have. France has said that they would do the mid-career personnel. Germany has said that they would train police officials in Dubai. Egypt has offered training, so has Jordan. Those offers have not been taken up by the administration. And there's a big gap. Why? We have to say that this has to be the first, or among the first priorities, is the training of the personnel. There is no reason that we shouldn't do it, and then let them take on the burden of protecting their country.
Given the current instability in Iraq, why is it crucial to commit to an exit strategy now?
Well, the underlying belief that I have, and is becoming increasingly apparent with the exception of the administration, is that we are part of the problem, not part of the solution. Yesterday, when we had the testimony of Wolfowitz and Myers, General Myers, we're talking about the number of foreign troops that are in there. Their estimate was about 1,000. The rest are Iraqis. Well, there are Baathists in there, there are pro-Saddam people in there, there are a lot of bad actors in there. But our estimate, as I mentioned in the talk, is that they had, in our intelligence estimate, in mid-summer, was that they had 5,000. At the October, it was 10. Now it's 20. And the Iraqi intelligence says it's 40. We're killing them at 1,500 a month. So there is something that's not connecting here. We're escalating at least the body counts. This has a memory for me when we were talking about body counts on this. We had the body counts of the numbers of the insurgency that we're killing. But still, the number keeps escalating. We have 32,000 detainees in Iraq, and less than 2% of them are foreigner. I mean, sure, we have the dangers on the Syrian border that have to be addressed. I mean, I think that's certainly a danger, and the borders are open to some very dangerous people there. But the fact remains, you fail to provide the water, you fail to provide jobs, you fail to provide the electricity over there, you fail to provide the services. You announce that you're building 14 bases in the country. You have the largest embassy in the world in a former Saddam Hussein palace, and you're trying to convince people that we're going to be out of there tomorrow or very soon, and you hear an administration that refuses to set a goal. When we have the administration officials before the Committee on the Armed Services, we ask them, what's the goal? The goal is we're going to, yesterday, Wolfowitz talked about, well, we needed the goal so that we're going to have a country that's going to have agencies, and these government agencies are going to work. They've got to uptrain their military. That's going to be very important. Finally, they have to have an independent judiciary and respect the rights of individuals, and also the development within that judiciary of the capability of protecting the various jurists in that. Well, there's a lot of people in this country don't think our agencies are working so well. And a lot of people that don't think that we're getting a real good system of justice on this. I think this is the answer that they gave, the most open-ended answer that you could possibly imagine. We have to have the goal. We have to establish goals. I say that we ought to, when you ask them what the exit strategy is, we won't stay there one day longer than we need to, and you ask them when they need to, and you get that kind of an answer. That's not convincing the Iraqis that they are going to own their own country. And if they don't own their own country, you're going to see the continued escalation. I mentioned just finally, this is a risk policy that we're talking about, that I've outlined here. But one thing I think we're all learning in our country now is staying there is going to see the continued alienation, the continued loss of life, and the continued destruction of a deterioration of America's position of influence in the world.
So we're not in the room, and it's just you and the president, and you're talking, and he asks you.
We do this all the time. Yeah, he listened to me.
So he asked you shortly before invading Iraq for advice. What advice would you have given him regarding the invasion?
Let the inspectors do their job. Let the inspectors do their job. Now listen to me. We had on the, it's now public, it was all a secret at the time, we had 147 locations. Our intelligence agency, Lieutenant, had 147 locations where the weapons of mass destruction were. And that committee, for those that are really interested in it, this is a very interesting case study that really Carl Levin, who's the senator, is our ranking member in the Armed Services Committee, extraordinary senator, and just did a breathtaking job on this. He kept asking, well, if we have 147, how many of those have we told the inspection team that we had? Well, we've told them 6 or 7. We're not going to tell them more, because if we tell them we don't trust the inspection team, they'll leak it to Saddam, and they'll move all those weapons that we know are over there, those weapons of mass destruction that are in those 147 sites, they'll move them all around. So we're only going to let them know 6 or 7 at a time. So that went on. They let them know 6 or 7. Then they let them know 20. Then they let them know 30. Then they said that they let it 50. Then they said they let them know 85 to 90. That was the testimony tendered before our committee. They never let them know one. That's the 9/11 Commission. Never told them one site. That was the testimony they told us in closed session of the Armed Services Committee, and that is the 9/11 Commission that we never even told them. They never told them because they couldn't find them. Even though Don Rumsfeld testified before our committee and told them they're somewhere east of Baghdad, there's some in the north of Baghdad, they're not far from Baghdad, but we know they're out there. But if we had let those inspectors go, they would have found out just what they have found out and what they have reported, and that is there were not weapons of mass destruction. There were the two connections, as all of you remember. One was the weapons of mass destruction, and second, the tie-in with Al-Qaeda in terms of 9/11. Those were the two reasons that were given. They never found the weapons of mass destruction and the tie-ins, the operational. They had individuals who were members of Al-Qaeda that were in Iraq. But the 9/11 Commission found unanimously that there was no operational relationship between the Iraqis and the terrorists. And that was, I think, that was apparent to some of us when we voted against the resolution in the Senate.
A question here that's off of the subject, but on to an important one for folk is, are you willing to share your opinion on Bush's Social Security plan and/or what alternatives you see for alleviating the issue?
Yeah. Am I willing to share?
Hey, I got to
briefly
read it like they wrote it.
You got a deck over there.
Oh,
you gotta put me on the spot. Listen, in looking at the Social Security, we ought to separate the facts from fiction. That's what we should have done in Iraq. That's what we ought to do on Social Security. And I dare say the same messages that misled us on Iraq are misleading us on Social Security. We have a long-term problem, but this administration hasn't got the solution. If there's a single person in here, that can tell me how the personal savings accounts are going to reduce the debt of Social Security, I wish they'd raise their hand. The president says, look, the long term, after 2048, we're going to have, he called it a bankrupt Social Security. Basic trustees of Social Security said even without doing anything at all, they'll be able to pay 75% of the benefits for another 25 years. But what in the world do private savings account have to filling in what he says is the deficit? Zero, nothing. He, on the one hand, says it's in trouble, and I'm going to give you a private savings account, and doesn't do anything about the problem. Hello? And the deal, for those who have a chance, I will be able to, if you pick up the Times today and read Paul Krugman in there, it'll take you 7 minutes to know why the private savings accounts are a bad deal. I mean, he basically, you know, in public policy, you always want to look who are the winners and who are the losers. And in this, the losers are going to be the people that invest. Now, I can say that, and you can say, well, let's get down in the weeds and get in the details. The more you get in the weeds and the details, you'll find out why it is going to be a high risk and why they're going to be losers on it. And I'd refer that the Times article today by Paul Krugman. The fact, let me just finish with this. Social Security was an insurance policy. We've got to understand it. It's an insurance policy. And it isn't only an insurance policy for elderly people, it's an insurance policy for the disabled. There are 7 million disabled. 95% of them depend upon their Social Security payment for 100% of their income. You want to start tampering around with the lines that we have to try to have a lifeline to the 7 million that are disabled? Beyond that, it is the lifeline for survivorship. Where do you think, for those children of those brave people, we're going to increase the allocations as long overdue. We should in terms of the death benefits. But where do you think how do you think the children of those who lost their lives, fall under survivorship? That's under Social Security. We're going to start tampering with that? Final point. Under the President's program, there will be a recognized third reduction in the benefits, even not just for those that choose personal savings account. Listen to me. For everyone. For everyone. 10% say they want personal saving account. Everyone is going to see the reduction in their benefits. These are the kinds of things that I think seniors are going to be interested in, but it isn't just seniors. This was a commitment at a time by the government in terms of an insurance policy. Our pension system is frayed. We don't know where we're going. These 401ks are at risk. Social Security out there is a lifeline, and this is one senator that's not going to unwind it. Thank you.
This is the final question. It says, Chancellor Motley has already shown bad judgment on this issue because he's a Steeler fan. So if we ask him, we know he won't pick right. So who is your Super Bowl pick? And by what margin?
I'd say it's 28-14. It's the Patriots. I want to tell you, I don't even think it's going to be close. I have to tell you, I had that bet with Senator Santorum. First of all, he was supporting Pittsburgh, and they have these marvelous Italian sandwiches for those people who have gone to Pittsburgh. And he's had to empty the Pittsburgh of these wonderful Italian sandwiches, and now he's taken Philadelphia, so we have the Philly cheesesteak, and we're getting there. I just wish Pennsylvania had more teams for the picking. Thank you. It's good to see you all. Appreciate everything.
You gave some real ammunition to kill me on all week. Pennsylvania had more teams.